Hello everyone and welcome to the Human Echoes recap for Channel 0, The No End House, Episode 5. This one's called The Damage. And as promised in the previous episode titles, the girls are out of the house. They have a hard time believing it. Some of the fandom has a hard time accepting it, but that's what's going on. Alright? They're able to drive their car around. The color scheme is different. I noticed in this episode in particular that the inside of the house is colored yellow. The coating, the light, the way they grade the footage for the house, inside is yellow and reds. Outside is very much blues and stark colors, a lot more. So everything about this is telling us they've gotten out of the house. I know a lot of you don't like that. I personally love it. We'll talk about more of the specifics of the generalities at the end, but they're out. And so is the father thing. Chasing after Jules and Margot in particular, it seems to be that the father thing can only eat the memories of the person that he was created for. And so he's zeroed in on getting to Margot and figuring out a way to survive. He's becoming desperate and hungry. We see him like straight up creeping in some dude's backyard, watching those little girls play. And it's a weird moment because it gives you more of this insight into how much of an inner life this thing has, in that he is seeing these girls playing, having some kind of memory of what it was like for him to play with his own daughter, what his own daughter was like at that age, and yet not being able to stop himself from trying to tear her apart memory by memory by memory until there's nothing left. I continue to love the storytelling on this show. And Jules and Margot get back to the house, and Margot gets a phone call from her mom. We haven't seen the mom a lot around. She's not at the house right now. But the mom has been worried about Margot. Margot kind of hand waves it or whatever, has some excuse about why she hasn't been around for 3 whole days. So we know that time passes normally inside the house, which is an interesting piece of information. And in this phone call, Margot's mom tells her, listen, I'm sorry that I didn't know you as well as your dad did. And she's working up to something here, and eventually gets to tell her that her father had committed suicide in order to collect this insurance money so that they would be able to keep the house because his business was underwater and he was about to lose everything. And this is a show that's a metaphor for the grieving process, right? About what we do with our grief, and how we react to other people's grief, and how we internalize all this stuff. And I'll get into a little bit more of that as we go on further with the father thing. But just in general, I love Margot's reaction to this because she's been living with this sort of mystery for so long. For one thing, she wasn't 100% sure if it was an accident, but she suspects it was suicide, but she doesn't know why it was suicide. From everything that we've seen, they had a very happy home life together. I'm sure that there were stressors and fights and things, especially all that stuff goes along with being very, very broke and, worrying about money. But everything that we've been given leads us to believe that this was a great home life, that this was a good dad to her. The real father. And she misses him so much, and she's been trying to figure out what caused this, what set this off, and now she has the answer. She has an answer, and another piece of proof, by the way, that we're not in the No End House still physically, because this is a piece of information that Margot did not previously know. The No End House, the father thing, can't tell you things that aren't already in your head. And her reaction to this is just so pure and genuine, of saying to Jules, I thought that this would make it easier. I thought knowing why my father did what he did would make accepting what he'd done easier, and it didn't. It makes it at least not easier, maybe harder, maybe worse to know that not only has she lost her father, but I'm sure in some twisted way inside her mind, she must feel like she's to blame because he did that for her and her mom. And I'm going to guess here, I feel like Margot would probably have rather had a dad than a house. But now she has a house and no dad. She does have the father thing though. And the father thing finally starts creeping up on her. There's a couple of cool scenes where she's sort of searching around for him and doesn't see him. But eventually, he makes it into the house. He's snuck in. Seth has followed this thing out of the house. And Seth is becoming a really interesting character too. He does some things in this episode that I think are still symptomatic of him trying to pull people into the house and pull Margot specifically into the house. I think he wants company inside the house. But he also, I think, does legitimately care about her. I think what he said in the previous episode is 100% the truth, that he really did come to like her in the few days that they knew each other and doesn't want something bad to happen to her. And he's here to help her deal with the father thing. And he has a plan, right? He stops the father thing from stealing her memory, interrupts him mid-meal on a little puppy fetus thing, which was just delightfully creepy. And, there's a showdown between Seth and Margot and the father thing. And Seth's idea is you gotta lure him back. Okay, you have to lead him into the house because that's the only way that you're going to get rid of him. And the interesting thing is we've seen these things die before. Like when Dylan was in the house, he shot one of them and it fell down and didn't get back up. So they're apparently not immortal. They can be killed, but Seth proposes a different way of going about it. And I think what he's doing here is saying, I want you back in, and I'm going to manipulate you however I can to get you back into the house. A, because that's what I do. That's my job for the house. And B, because I don't want to be alone. I like being around you, and it's going to be another year before the house lands somewhere, so come with me. I think that's what's going on here. Seth is, on one hand, legitimately trying to help Margot deal with the problem, but also sort of twisting that help into also helping himself. Margot doesn't want to do this. She makes the father thing go in the basement by hurting herself, interestingly enough, which is something that we really haven't seen much of. We know that it's not like he literally feels her pain, right? Because JT was able to kill other JT and be just fine. I mean, he eventually did unravel, but he was more or less okay. But again, we're getting evidence here. The father thing legitimately cares about Margot and doesn't want to see her hurt herself. In kind of the background of all this stuff happening, Jules is dealing with whatever it is Jules is dealing with. I still don't know exactly what's going on here. Something has gone down with her that she erased the entire memory of her family. And it's not just an accident, I don't think. As far as I can tell, it's not just accidentally had that egg thing just suck all my memories out. That sucked, wasn't it? Oh well. It's not one of those kind of situations. She's got some kind of pain she's dealing with, and she's trying to bring herself to face it, and she can't do it. And her and Margot are kind of interesting opposite sides of this coin. Whereas Margot, I think what we're doing metaphorically here with her and the father thing is that she has sort of embraced this grief. She's wallowed in it. She's defined herself by it. And on the other hand, Jules has something that she's grieving about, but she's locked it in a closet and kept it away and tried to shove it as far from herself as possible. And I think where we're going metaphorically with the whole No End House arc is that this is really a metaphor for the grieving process and what it takes. And Margot in her portion of the grieving process, is not willing to give up this shell of a thing that is not her dad, but makes her think of her dad, because it helps her, she thinks, to be a little bit more normal. But it's not. It's really holding her down. It really is a monster in the end. It will consume her if she doesn't let it go. If she doesn't find a way to get rid of it and deal with it. She's dealt with it too much. In other words, she's overdealt with her grief. She's wallowed in it so long. Whereas Jules is exactly the opposite. She has to deal with her whatever issues she's having on some level. And I don't know what those issues are. I'm really looking forward to finding out. But she can't bring herself to face them. She never makes it back to her house. She stands outside the house and sees the staticky memories of the things that are gone now and cannot bring herself to go in. It's an interesting dichotomy, and it's why I like what this show has done, because I know that some of you are annoyed that this is not still the inside of the house somehow, they're not still hallucinating, but I think the larger picture is that even if you get out of the house physically, the house is never done with you. You're never escaping the grasp of that grief that you have to face. And the house is definitely not done with Margot and Jules. Margot tries to halfway deal with the problem by killing the father thing off. She thinks she's got an elegant solution. She still has his pills that he killed himself with from way back when. By the way, if you needed another sign that she's not dealing with this in a healthy way, like the fact that she held on to the pill bottle for a year that he killed himself with, that's a sign, I think. That does not seem like a real healthy way to deal with that situation. But she has Seth mix the pills in with what's left of the pomegranate puppy, brings the father thing up from the basement, lets him eat the pomegranates. And there's a great little bit here where he tells her the story of the memory that he consumed of this little puppy that she found and rescued from like drowning in a river, and then it was like it wasn't, she couldn't keep it because she had an allergy, which, by the way, I'm 100% on board with that because I've got a cat allergy and I really like cats, but I can't have one. But she gave one up, gave this dog up, and asked about it periodically. And you can tell when the father thing first took this memory, I was like, he took the memory of her childhood puppy? What a jerk. But then as he's telling the story, I thought, oh, well, it wasn't like a long-term memory. It's a very small thing. It's not like he's taking the memory of her mom like he did in the first place. So interesting balance there. He then starts to choke, and again, talking about processing grief here, Margot gets to see what actually happened when her dad died. This replicant thing reacts to the poison in, I'm going to assume, the same way that her actual dad would have reacted. And she's horrified because he had told her, the father thing told her that there wasn't any pain initially. Or maybe it was the second story that he told her. I forget. One of them was a lie. But now she's seeing what this literally actually looked like and seeing how her dad died. And it just, like, it's awful. He's swelling up and choking, and she's living this for the first time, even though she's lived it in her mind over and over and over again. He drops down, seems like he's dead. Her and Seth try to bring the body out of the house, and the mom comes home, which is a lovely twist right here. I wish that had gone on more. I don't know where you would go with wife sees her husband that's been deceased for a year just show up back in the world. I don't know what that would be. And also the fact that when she sees him show back up, he's still all like messed up like he was when her daughter found him. From her perspective, this story is so messed up. I mean, it's messed up anyway, but really bad. The father thing kind of gets in a fight, knocks out the mother, knocks out Margot, I believe. Or no, I'm sorry, knocks out Seth. Margot is running through the house. It's a really great, I forget what the name of the movie with the cave was, but where they're like being chased by these eyeless kind of albino creatures in this cave, these ladies. And there's this idea that they can be right next to you, and as long as you don't make a sound, you're okay. Kind of reminiscent of that, but just in somebody's house where she's trying to sneak around and get out without the thing catching her. It finally does catch her. Seth comes to her rescue, knocks him out, and they agree. They come to an agreement. Margot says, okay, fine. We'll go back to the house. Jules, meanwhile, has not been able to bring herself to go back to her house. She's freaking out. She heads back to Margot's house, where she sees things have gone down and realizes that they've already left back to the no-end house. Books it back to the no-end house. Margot and Seth and the father thing are already back in there, and Jules is left outside alone for what we are told is going to be another year. All right, according to the rules that Seth puts down, the no-end house shows up once a year and feeds for like a week or 3 days, or it's not exactly clear, but it's a once a year thing. It's an annual occurrence, and it pops around different places around the world. I don't know where we're going next. I don't know what happens next. I forgot to mention, but I thought it was very interesting. JD talks about the prospects of living inside the house, and that caged family we've been talking about this whole time finally realized that is JD's family that the house created for him, but that he put into a cage so that they would not eat his memories. And for some reason they haven't unraveled, which is an interesting, I don't know how that worked. I don't know how they haven't, maybe he gives them a little something every once in a while, but essentially leaves them locked away. And this is what he wants Margot to do. This is his strategy for surviving inside the house. Speaking of unhealthy ways to deal with your grief, this is another one. It seems like Seth has a real unhealthy way of dealing with his grief. Did I say JD earlier? I meant Seth. Anyway, that he's sort of caging these memories up and keeping them, but not letting them fade away or do anything, just sort of keeping them in stasis. He's sort of a flip side to the coin of what Margot's doing. So for all of these reasons of how this is talking about the portrayal of the grief process, I'm really digging this. I've seen several of you sort of have some backlash to the fact that it's going off-road from the original story in that they don't stay, they can get out of the house physically. But to me, the idea that even if you're physically out of the house, you can't ever escape what the house is in your soul, that idea, the fact that the house chases after you even if you leave it, that works really well for me. I was 100% on board with this, as I have been for this whole season, and I am really, really looking forward to how they resolve this whole thing in the next episode. I hope you guys are too. I'm seeing like maybe a time jump, but in the preview thing we saw, Jules is all like bloody and like determined to do something, and I don't know what that is. But I also really want to find out what Jules' deal is. I hope we get a reveal there, because I'm curious. What is it that she needs to have scrubbed from her mind so bad about her family? Or does she just hate her home life? Or I don't know. But I just love this to pieces, and I hope you guys are too. That's it for this recap of the No End House. I hope you guys are going to have a great week, and y'all take care.